Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Nikki Newman's hand trembled as she gripped the polished arm of the courtroom bench, the echo of the judge's gavel still vibrating through the tense, suffocating air, every heartbeat resounding like a ticking clock counting down to the destruction of her marriage, a union forged through decades of betrayal and reconciliation, love and war, addiction and devotion. She could feel Victor's eyes locked on her, unblinking, calculated but not cold, not entirely, because beneath the commanding posture, for which he was infamous, there lingered a flicker of something else, something raw, something like desperation masked behind corporate steel, as if even he feared the power of what was about to unfold. Reporters leaned forward, the fluorescent lights burning hot above the standing room, only courtroom packed with Newman loyalists, Newman enemies, and Newman opportunists, all hungry for the drama of the century. Victor Newman versus Nikki Newman again. But this time something was different, something irreversible, because Victor, known for strategy in the boardroom and courtroom alike, had not hired just any attorney for this divorce proceeding. No, he had arrived with an arsenal, a manila folder, thick with documents and a small flash drive positioned like a loaded weapon on the polished mahogany table. Nikki's breathing grew shallow as she watched him stand, slow, deliberate, powerful, his movements echoing authority, and for the first time since filing for divorce, her resolve wavered. He addressed the court, his baritone steady, announcing he intended to present irrefutable evidence that would demonstrate Nikki had been compromised beyond emotional abandonment, evidence that would reveal manipulation, deceit, and betrayal from the people closest to her, or worse, that Nikki herself had jeopardized their marriage in ways Victor could no longer ignore. A murmur rippled through the room as an undercurrent of dread washed over Nikki, her pulse quickening, mind racing back through secrets she buried under the guise of sobriety and self-protection. She whispered sharply to her attorney, but her voice dissolved into a hoarse whisper as Victor retrieved a remote and clicked toward the screen situated behind the judge, an unexpected update to the typical courtroom technology. The lights dimmed, screens flickered, and Nikki's vision blurred. On the screen appeared covert footage, time-stamped, clearly shot without her knowledge, showing her entering a hotel suite at odd hours across several nights, staggering slightly, the unmistakable clink of glass bottles audible, the chilling image of Nikki lifting a trembling hand with a drink pressed to her lips, proof she had relapsed not once but repeatedly over months. Gasps erupted. A reporter dropped a pen. Nikki's eyes widened with horror, her breath freezing in her chest as though an invisible fist squeezed her ribs. She shook her head, mouthing no. As Victor narrated, voice steady, controlled, revealing that he had hired private security not to control her, but to protect her from herself, claiming he feared someone was exploiting her vulnerability. Nikki looked toward him, betrayal flashing like lightning across her face, because this was the man she had trusted, the man she had begged to believe she was sober, the man to whom she had promised transparency. Yet here he stood exposing her most vulnerable, shameful battles in a public courtroom. But Victor wasn't finished. He turned to the second set of evidence, his tone shifting from raw concern to ruthless precision. A series of bank transfers appeared on screen, withdrawals from Newman corporate accounts, not large enough to jeopardize the empire, but suspicious enough to raise eyebrows. Nikki stammered as Victor alleged she was being blackmailed by an unknown individual threatening to expose her relapse unless she paid. The implication cut deeper than accusation. It painted Nikki not merely as a relapsed alcoholic, but as a liability, a weak link susceptible to manipulation, placing Newman Enterprises at risk. Her knees buckled beneath her, legs trembling like reeds in a storm, reality warping as whispers filled the room, the weight of humiliation sealing her throat shut. Victor pressed on, driven by fury or heartbreak. No one could tell, as he implied the blackmailer might be someone seated in the very room. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights blurred into streaks as Nikki swayed, the judge demanding order, but the words dissolved into echoes drowned beneath Nikki's rising panic, guilt, and confusion. The ground beneath her feet fractured into shards of betrayal and despair as she processed the impossible truth. Victor wasn't merely divorcing her, he was destroying her, his evidence a double-edged sword meant to expose her vulnerability, while simultaneously shielding her from danger he claimed still lurked unseen. Nikki felt a cold sweat glisten across her brow, her pulse hammering like a trapped bird, her breathing turning shallow. The flash drive glinted under the courtroom lights as Victor handed it toward the judge with chilling formality. His jaw clenched, fingertips trembling for only a fraction of a second, a fleeting betrayal of the emotion he fought to suppress. Nikki's world contracted. The whispers grew louder, the lights brighter, her shame bleeding into terror. She grasped the table for support but her fingers slipped, numbness crawling up her arms. Her heartbeat became an erratic drumbeat in her ears. Victor paused mid-sentence, his eyes softening only slightly as he saw her sway. But before he could reach her, Nikki's vision tunneled, the room spinning violently. She inhaled sharply, choked on air, and collapsed to the cold courtroom floor like a marionette severed from its strings. Gasps shattered the silence. Reporters lunged forward, cameras flashing, capturing the fall of a Newman matriarch. Victor's mask cracked as he rushed to her side, barking orders for medical help, his hand sliding beneath her head, desperation leaking through his controlled facade. The judge called for a recess, chaos consuming the room. As paramedics arrived, Victor hovered protectively, whispering Nikki's name with raw anguish, but the courtroom buzzed with conspiracy. Had Victor gone too far? Had Nikki known too little? Was her fainting spell genuine or strategic? And deep beneath the chaos, the flash drive remained untouched for the moment, its secret still secured, yet ready to detonate the Newman universe once Nikki awoke to the storm her collapse had delayed. For although Victor demanded transparency, the courtroom could not shake the suspicion that his shocking evidence, both revealing and protective, might conceal an even darker truth, one that threatened not just Nikki's sobriety and reputation, but the very foundation of Newman Enterprises and the loyalty of everyone orbiting its power. And when Nikki opened her eyes again, the damage would already be irreversible. In the sterile chill of the hospital corridors, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, each pulse echoing Victor's rising panic as he paced outside Nikki's room, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the tiled floor in a rhythm that betrayed the internal storm he tried desperately to cage. He replayed the courtroom collapse again and again, the moment Nikki's eyes glazed, her knees buckled, and the world seemed to implode beneath the weight of his actions, his intentions tangled like barbed wire between protecting Nikki and controlling her, exposing her weakness and shielding her from those who would hunt it. Meanwhile, Newman loyalists clustered nearby, whispering fragmented conspiracies while reporters camped outside the hospital entrance, cameras aimed like weapons ready to fire the moment Victor emerged. The judge had suspended proceedings until Nikki recovered, but everyone knew the emotional shrapnel from Victor's reveal had already detonated. Victor pressed a hand against the window, watching Nikki motionless in the bed, tubes and monitors encircling her fragile frame, and his heart clenched with a mixture of regret and justification, because though he believed exposing her relapse might force her to confront the spiral she hid so fiercely, he also understood the magnitude of betrayal she must have felt when the most private demon she battled quietly behind closed doors had been projected for the world to dissect. Her eyelids flickered. A doctor approached Victor with cautious optimism, confirming Nikki had fainted from a combination of shock, stress, and dangerously elevated blood pressure. Victor nodded, dismissing staff with a commanding flick of his hand, then entered Nikki's room alone, closing the door behind him with agonizing slowness. Nikki stirred, eyelids heavy as though lifting iron gates. When her bleary gaze met Victor's, fear and fury ignited like gasoline meeting flame. She rasped a question, why? The single word slicing through the sterile air sharper than any accusation. Victor inhaled deeply, preparing to deliver justification wrapped in love but barbed with control, explaining that he had uncovered the blackmail and surveillance trail months earlier, choosing to keep the information hidden to protect her until he realized the threat had grown too dangerous to ignore. But Nikki saw only betrayal, recalling every secret relapse, every trembling hand, every lie she told herself while clinging to sobriety's fragile thread, now unraveling in front of the world. She demanded to know whether the divorce was a calculated maneuver to isolate her, if exposing her weakness was another Newman power play designed to keep her dependent on Victor, unable to escape his orbit. Victor denied it, insisting he filed countersuits only to gain legal authority to protect her finances and safeguard company assets from the blackmailer's reach. But the lines between protection and possession blurred until Nikki couldn't tell whether Victor wanted to save her or own her. Her voice cracked with raw anguish as she accused him of stripping her dignity to prove she needed him. Victor's commanding posture faltered for a fleeting second, emotions battling behind his steely gaze, But before either could continue, their attorney appeared breathlessly with devastating news. The flash drive Victor submitted as evidence, the one containing surveillance footage, emails and documents revealing the blackmail scheme, had disappeared from the courtroom evidence locker during the chaos after Nikki fainted. Victor's jaw clenched, eyes burning with barely contained rage. Nikki shifted, confusion piercing the haze of her pain. The attorney warned that whoever stole the flash drive now possessed explosive ammunition capable of dismantling Newman Enterprises, destroying Nikki's reputation, and weaponizing Victor's vulnerability. Realization dawned. Someone in that courtroom had waited for Nikki's collapse to strike, using her fainting spell as a smokescreen. Victor summoned his security team, barking orders into his phone with lethal precision, commanding investigations into every witness, attorney, bailiff and reporter present. But Nikki, trembling and pale, whispered through clenched teeth that the person responsible was closer than Victor thought. Someone in his own inner circle. Someone who stood to gain from the destruction of their marriage, their empire, and Nikki's already fragile sobriety. Victor's breath caught. Suspicion flared like wildfire. Could it be one of his trusted children determined to seize control? A corporate rival lurking beneath familial loyalty? An ex-employee seeking vengeance? Or worse, someone targeting Nikki personally, using her relapse not merely as leverage, but as bait to destabilize Victor's world. As Nikki tried sitting upright, dizziness clouding her vision, she clutched Victor's wrist with trembling fingers and revealed a chilling truth she had kept hidden even from herself until the courtroom spectacle triggered the memory. A distorted voice had left messages on her private phone weeks earlier, threatening exposure unless she complied. Not merely to siphon money, but to sabotage Victor's legacy by destroying Nikki's credibility as the only person who could hold Victor accountable. Emotionally, Victor froze, eyes narrowing. Nikki explained she deleted the messages in panic, terrified Victor would discover her relapse and cut her out completely. Regret washed over her, heavy and suffocating, as she whispered that maybe Victor needed the divorce to protect Newman Enterprises from her weakness. Maybe he was right. But Victor shook his head, gripping her hand with unexpected tenderness, confessing that he filed for divorce not because he stopped loving her, but because he believed the threat required legal separation to shield the company during an investigation. Nikki searched his eyes, doubt gnawing at her heart. Years of history taught her Victor's love and control were inseparable twins, impossible to distinguish until the damage was irreversible. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Victoria Newman stood there breathless, clutching a hospital tablet displaying terrifying news. A video had leaked online of Nikki entering the secret hotel suite, the same footage Victor projected in court. It had been posted anonymously minutes earlier, spreading across media platforms like wildfire, accompanied by captions implying Nikki not only relapsed but engaged in illicit meetings that could compromise corporate secrets. Nikki gasped, tears pooling. Victor's fury reached volcanic intensity, vows of retaliation spilling from his lips. Victoria warned that the leak suggested the blackmailer no longer needed the flash drive. The damage had begun. And somewhere, someone watched satisfied, knowing that Victor's shocking revelation didn't just expose Nikki. It detonated the first bomb in a war still unfolding. The hospital room thickened with dread. Victor stepped back as Nikki sobbed, realization dawning that her fainting spell had delayed disaster only briefly. The true storm had just begun. Chaos rippled through the hospital as Victor demanded immediate containment, ordering security to track the leak and locate whoever stole the flash drive. But whispers filtered through the corridors from nurses glued to their phones, already replaying grainy footage of Nikki stumbling into the hotel suite, her vulnerability captured frame by frame for the world to dissect. And in that moment, Nikki felt stripped bare, her relapse transformed into a public spectacle. Not a cry for help but evidence weaponized by a shadowy enemy whose motives were more sinister than humiliation, because someone wanted to destroy her entirely, to ensure she was no longer the steady gravitational pull anchoring Victor's ruthlessness with compassion. Victor clenched his fists, eyes flickering with a fury that bordered on dangerous resolve, threatening to unleash the full might of Newman retaliation. But Victoria, still breathless, urged caution, warning that if this became another Newman cover-up scandal, the public would devour them alive. Nikki trembled, her voice slicing through the tension as she whispered that the blackmailer's intent wasn't financial. It was personal. The realization dawned slowly, chilling every nerve in Victor's spine. This wasn't about the company, the fortune, or the empire. This was revenge. Suddenly, the hospital lights flickered, screens around the ward flashing glitch-like distortions before cutting to static. Then a distorted voice crackled through every monitor, taunting, metallic, warped. The world sees the truth. And soon Victor Newman will fall. Panic erupted as alarms blared. Nurses rushed to reset systems, and Victoria shielded Nikki while Victor stared stone still, shock briefly piercing his armor. A security guard sprinted down the hall, shouting reports of server breaches across Newman departments, suggesting the attacker had infiltrated corporate firewalls to sabotage from within. Nikki clutched Victor's arm, fear twisting her already fragile nerves, asking whether their enemy had always been inside the family. Victor's silence spoke volumes. For the first time in decades, the titan of industry appeared vulnerable, uncertain, a king watching his kingdom crumble, brick by brick, from an invisible threat he failed to anticipate. Suddenly, Nick burst into the room, breath ragged, revealing that Newman Media headquarters had been hacked. Files were wiped, private emails exposed, and headlines were appearing that framed the divorce proceedings as a calculated plot between Victor and Nikki to siphon assets before bankruptcy. Nikki's breathing faltered, memories crashing, voices pressuring her, messages threatening exposure, unexplained shadows following her car. The blackmailer had orchestrated every step, nudging her relapse, exploiting her guilt, manufacturing chaos, all while waiting for Victor to detonate the courtroom bomb. Victor then understood. Exposing Nikki had played directly into the enemy's plan. Rage and guilt collided in his chest, but before he could speak, Nikki whispered a name, barely audible, trembling, but Victor stiffened instantly, his expression turning ghost white. Victoria demanded to know what Nikki said, and Nikki repeated it, stronger this time, revealing a face from Victor's past presumed dead or forgotten. Someone with motive, access, and knowledge of every Newman vulnerability. The room froze. Victor's pulse thundered. And in that breathless silence the truth settled. This wasn't simply a divorce. This was war. And the real battle had only begun.